the category of physical stress, obviously trauma isn't good for our cells, but being sedentary is just as bad because if you don't move, you don't generate blood flow. So congestion of dead cells and debris is constantly collecting in the spaces around our cells and if that isn't flushed out, then our cells just can't breathe. They can't purge toxic substances.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have Dr. Bill Rawls, MD, on the line with us. For over 30 years, Dr. Bill Rawls has dedicated his life to medicine. When a health crisis with chronic Lyme disease abruptly changed his quality of life, he came face to face with the limitations of modern medicine and began to explore the vast possibilities of alternative treatments. Restoring his health through holistic and herbal therapies inspired him to share his revelations on the importance of cellular wellness for defending against microbes and other root causes of illness. I was just talking to him about this before we started the recording. It's really fascinating. I can't wait to get into it. Not too many people are talking about cellular wellness and microbes like we are today. So he works to bring life and vitality to others as he helps them establish their own paths to wellness through modern herbology. He is the author of a couple of different best-selling books, and I could go on, but let's jump into it. Dr. Bill, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it.
Well, let's start with a brief background of kind of how you got into the work that you're doing today.
Yeah. I need to update my bio. This year is 40 years since I graduated from medical school. So I've been doing this a while, but it's also 20 years since I had a turning point of becoming chronically ill and then started getting better. So that 20 years has really been exploring a lot of the reasons why and coming to very different conclusions. But my career started in OBGYN. I went into obstetrics and gynecology because I really was pretty turned off about what was happening with chronic management of illness, that people are just getting medications but not getting well. So I chose a field that was bringing life into the world and dealing with healthy people and acute interventions that really mattered. But that came with call every second to third night, every second to third weekend. And most nights I was on call. I didn't sleep, but I was just so into life that even when I wasn't on call, a lot of times I didn't sleep because I was staying up nights, catching up on everything else. And so I was sleep deprived for 20 years. Long story short, my health crashed and I developed just about every symptom you can imagine, but didn't have something to define a particular illness. Settled for fibromyalgia. Just wasn't satisfied with that because everybody knows, that's just going to get you good medications for symptoms, and that's about it. Kept searching, found that I was carrying the Lyme bacteria, but I didn't get sick around a tick bite. I had got tick bites when I was a kid, but never remembered becoming ill around them. But like so many people, it was like, there has to be a reason why I'm sick. There has to be a way out of this. I kept searching and I thought, hey, I can take antibiotics and get well. Antibiotics made me sicker instead of better for a lot of reasons, wrecked my gut. And there are a lot of reasons why, for these kinds of situations, antibiotics are not ideal. I happened upon an herbal protocol for Lyme disease and thought, didn't have high expectations, but maybe at least it has a low probability of hurting me. And I thought, well, if it does work, if it actually is killing these bacteria, it's going to wreck my gut like antibiotics did. It didn't. Over 3 months, I started getting better and better. And over 3 to 5 years, all my symptoms went away. I've been taking herbs now for 20 years. I've experienced some of the best health that I've had in my entire life over the past decade. I'm 67. I'm out kite surfing and still doing all the things that I love. And so it's an interesting story. And the past 20 years has been just this ongoing discovery of why, what was happening inside my body, what were the herbs actually doing. And it's brought me to very different conclusions than much of the rest of the medical world.
Mm. Yeah, I love that, and I want to get into some of those different conclusions. It's really interesting stuff. But I do want to point out first what you said. I love how you talk about herbal medicine and different herbs, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into that. And I think it's important for people to realize, like, because some people are like, "Oh, you take supplements. Isn't that just all synthetic stuff and whatever?" And that's actually no. Most of the supplements that I take are actually herbal supplements, like plants that are extracts or plants that that are from the earth, that are you probably should be eating in natural whole food form, but most of us are not, right? So I think there's a difference there, a distinction that I really wanted to make there as well.
Yeah, I think that is important. We tend, if you go to a health food store, you have vitamins and minerals and other natural things like coenzyme Q10. They're all on the shelf with the herbs, and people think, well, they're all the same thing, and they're very, very much not. So, what we're taking with vitamins and minerals and other kinds of natural substances are things that our body needs to function. And very specifically, our cells. Our cells need carbohydrates, fats, amino acids, vitamins, minerals to basically do their functions, to generate energy. Those are nutrients. So, nutrients are things our cells need to function. When you look at herbs, they are not nutrient dense. It's not a good source of vitamins, minerals, and other kinds of things. What we're looking for from an herb is chemistry of the plant that the plant is using for a purpose. And that purpose is to defend the plant against microbes and free radicals and toxic substances and radiation. So they are solving problems. They're protecting themselves with this really sophisticated chemistry. So when we take that, we get those benefits. And that's what we're getting from an herb is this robust defense and regulatory system that the plant is using. Well, we can use that also to protect the cells of our body.
Amazing. Yeah, really, really good explanation there. And I want to transition into something you just mentioned, which, again, in over 200 podcast episodes, we haven't had anyone that I can remember really talk about this or mention it really in any kind of in depth at all. And that is microbes. So, again, I've listened to tons of health podcasts. We've recorded over 200 here. And explain to me, what is a microbe? Let's kind of start there. How many microbes, or are there microbes in different parts of our body, or what's going on there, and what role are they playing, and what's your whole theory around this?
Yeah, it's we are an ecosystem. We have lots of things that are part of us that aren't us. And a microbe is a bacteria. It's basically a one-celled living organism, with the exception of viruses. So bacteria are microbes. Protozoa are microbes. Now they're bigger, they're more complex, they're more like our cells, where bacteria are very, very primitive and small, about 100 times smaller, or even 1,000 times smaller than one of our cells. So protozoa are a little bit bigger, more complex. Yeast are fungal versions. It's a one-celled fungus that can act like other microbes. And then viruses are just a segment of DNA inside a capsule that they inject themselves into our cells. And when they do that, they take over the machinery of the cell, and it's almost like they become alive. What's interesting, though, is when you look at all of those things, the margins blur. And they all act very similarly when they infect us, and they have similar strategies and wants as far as why they want to do that. So that's always a big question. What do microbes want from us?
Yeah, that is, I mean, that is an interesting question. By the way, I don't know why it made me think of this, but like, did you hear like when there's a full moon, it has, can affect the microbes or parasites in your body, and that is actually why people act a little weirder during a full moon? Or is there anything to these crazy theories?
I think that, well, no doubt that we are affected by the gravitational pull of the moon. I live right on the coast, the east coast of of the United States, and I watch tide go in and out every day, and it has an effect on nature. So that gravitational pull, it can do things, and there's no doubt that our microbes influence us in a lot of different ways. And, that favorable relationship we have with the microbes that we define as normal flora can be quite good. But microbes are talking to each other and they're actually communicating with our cells too. And they do that with neurotransmitters and chemical messengers that are very similar to the things that we have, like GABA and serotonin and dopamine. Um, so when our gut flora are producing favorable neurotransmitters, that can make us feel good. But pathogens, things that aren't so favorable, use things that can be excitatory. They can stimulate us, keep us from sleeping at night. And that's a big deal with an infection. But then other microbes, well, the big one is rabies. You think about it's a virus and it infects animals and it makes them angry. So they will go out and bite other creatures to spread the virus, which is really interesting. There's one called toxoplasma that is very, very common worldwide. We can harbor it without knowing it. Many, many people do. But in an active state, it influences our brain cells and it can make our behavior more aggressive. It's been associated with suicides, aggressive behavior, domestic violence, all kinds of things. And those are situations in lower animals. Its reservoir is cats. It can, the cat biting something can help spread that microbe. So it influences the behavior of animals. So yeah, it is really interesting how much microbes affect us.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. And so, I guess how do we, first of all, is there any kind of a test or like, is there a gut health test or something where you can see something that you like to do maybe with people that you've worked with or consulted for? Is there any way we could see if we have more beneficial or bad or, microbes, things like that?
Yeah, but it's not a test.
What is it?
You feel good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right?
Simple as that.
Exactly. Exactly.
You we base everything in our world on testing. We test and treat and test again, and then we
Hmm.
test some more.
Hmm.
And, providers have gotten so they do a lot more testing than they do talking. And that's one of the reasons why our medical system is so ineffective, because
Hmm.
all testing has issues. Every single test has limitations. And when we use it make interpretations that it's not capable of that kind of accuracy, or not giving us all of the information that we need, then it actually can harm instead of help. And that's true of the microbiome. Every person's microbiome is different, but there are upwards of 40,000 different species that we know of right now. And that's just the bacteria. They haven't even started counting the viruses and everything else. And so, this idea of doing a testing somebody's microbiome so you can match them with a probiotic or this, that, and the other, it's mainly just marketing hype, quite frankly. It just
Yeah.
isn't getting us there. And testing for microbes in general is problematic because what the testing is designed for is an acute infection of a fast growing bacteria, virus, whatever. So when something first enters our body, it's typically very aggressive. It's trying to break through the barriers So, for things have to go through barriers. Our first level of defense is our skin and the lining of our gut and the lining of our sinuses and our gums. So those barriers are designed to keep microbes out and moisture in. But microbes are constantly getting through those barriers. So our backup is our immune defense system. And we have sentries placed at all of the different openings, just ready for microbes coming in, because microbes are flowing in all the time. I mean, right now while we're talking, bacteria from our gut, from our gums, from our skin are trickling into our bloodstream.
Yeah.
So it happens a lot more than people recognize. And so, so some of them can get in without really even us knowing about it, and can sometimes cause issues, but sometimes just pass through and not be a big deal. But yeah, so it's that exposure is much more common than we realize. And getting back to the testing, a what you're testing, where testing is really good is when you have an acute infection with something that's really aggressive, like bacterial pneumonia. So like a pneumococcal pneumonia typically doubles itself every 20 minutes. So it's really fast
Wow.
growing. That's where antibiotics work well. And you want to know that you're getting the right antibiotic. You don't have a bacteria that's resistant to it, because antibiotic resistance is a real problem today. So you want something that is effective. But when you talk about all the things that we already have in us, in our tissues, in our gut, those things are very, very slow growing, and the immune response is different. So the testing isn't as good. So getting a broad spectrum of everything that we have going on, or things that might be making us chronically ill, is just not as accurate.
Yeah, yeah, I tend to agree as well. And I've actually recently, I won't mention the name of the test, but a few people have said, "Oh, I just got this gut health test. What do you think of the results? And, should I follow their recommendations?" And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's like, it's first of all, it was so generic, and like the advice was very generic. And we had a good friend of mine, Dr. Chanu Dasari, a few episodes back as well. He's a gut health doctor. And he even said, look, even if you get the test results and it shows, okay, you're low in this strain, just because you supplement with that strain, there's so many things going on in your gut. There's so many things interacting with each other together at the same time, that it's not just as simple as it's some crazy formula that really we don't have the answer to, that you could just fix with, what some probiotics. It's really, like you said, they're selling probiotics, and they're doing it, in a way there. Again, I don't know. I think maybe over time, hopefully they will come out with better tests, and maybe these things will get more accurate, and we'll figure out, hey, here's the formula that actually works, and things like that. But yeah, I think going back to what you said, do you feel good, right? How do you feel? And so
Yeah.
let's actually dig into that. So there may be people listening right now. I'm sure there's many people listening who are like, I just don't have the energy that I used to. I've gained a few pounds. I just don't feel like I have that drive maybe that I used to have. What advice, or where would you go with someone who's talking like that?
Yeah. I think we don't pay attention to our body as much as we should or could, and the information that our body is giving us is very important. When you think about it on the cellular level, it really makes a lot of sense. So our body is made exclusively of cells, right? I mean, everything. Our eyes are made of cells, everything in the body is made of cells, and it's loosely held together with connective tissue. Everything that happens in the body, whether it's thyroid hormone being produced, heart beating, brain impulses, liver functioning, everything, it's done by cells. So absolutely everything is done by cells. So if all your cells are working well, you'll feel great. But if your cells are stressed, then you notice that as a symptom. So a couple of things happen when enough cells in the body are stressed. And if it's a particular type of cell, then you start losing that function. So, in other words, if you have chest pain and start having an irregular heartbeat, that's your heart cells. Those cells are being stressed in some way. So, a lot of times a symptom will point to the cells that are being stressed. So, that second component is that when cells are stressed or injured, like if you cut your finger, they release chemicals that let your brain know that something's wrong. So, we may feel it as pain or discomfort. So, loss of function, pain, and discomfort are the two things that happen with a symptom. Well, if things are going on that are stressing all of the cells in your body all at once, when cells are stressed, they work harder, they use more energy, and they burn their mitochondrial battery down. So mitochondria are our energy source for our cells, and that acts kind of like a battery, and you basically drain your battery if you're stressing your cells and making them work harder. So the symptom of that is fatigue. So if you're feeling fatigued and run down, it's a sign that your cells are stressed. There's some things going on. But this is true no matter what the symptom, no matter what we're talking about with any kind of chronic illness, it all comes back to cellular stress. So the root causes of all illness are the root causes of cellular stress. And it's really not as big a thing, hard a thing to get to as you might think.
Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. So, talk about cellular health. When you talk about cellular health, I guess what are some of the things that people can do, or some of the foods that they can be eating, or what are some of the things that you think can improve cellular health versus what are some of the big no-nos that are ruining people's cellular health?
Yeah, it's really a pretty simple formula. So we tend to think about the body as a whole, like we would compare us to a robot. But the difference is a robot, a cell phone, a car, that's one unit. And if something breaks in that unit, it's done. It has to be fixed. Our body isn't like that at all. We're not like a robot. Our body is made of these individual cells, and each cell is an individual functioning unit. You can think about them almost like little microscopic or nano robots that are all working together. And all those functions are coordinated with hormones and other signaling agents. All the cells have to talk to one another to work well together. But each of them are independent. So think about them as little microscopic biological machines. Well, all machines have specific operating requirements. So there are only 5 things that cells need to function right. And if they don't get them, they get stressed. So the first you mentioned is nutrients. The cells need right nutrients. They need carbohydrates, fats to generate energy and do other things. They need amino acids to build proteins, which are basically the structure of the cell. They need vitamins and minerals to make the machine work. Now, different cells have different functions, and they've been modified to do different things, but basically they're structurally all the same. You think about it, they all came from one cell. One cell started and it became diversified to all our cells. So structurally, they're very similar. So they need the right nutrients. And they don't get the right nutrients from a carb-loaded modern food processed diet. And so that whole food diet that you hear about so much, a wide spectrum of a diverse whole foods, fruits and vegetables and different kinds, and some grains, but also meats and the diversity of foods, you're going to pick up everything that your cells need to function. Whole food diet, rich in vegetables, keep your carbs lower. And I try to keep my carbohydrate count below 150, which isn't ketogenic, but it's low. It's enough to keep me from damaging my cells. Second thing is cells need a clean environment. So we live in a world where we're exposed to a lot of toxic substances that are unnatural that weren't here 100 years ago. All the petroleum and plastics and pesticides, everything is petroleum derived, or it comes from coal. Like heavy metals are coming from coal smoke. So those things get in our body. They're easily absorbed because they're organic molecules, but they've been distorted by millions of years in the earth. And so they're not compatible with biological life. They basically inhibit our cellular functions. So our cells can't work as well. They have to work harder. They burn out faster. They burn more energy. So exposure to toxic substances. Number three, cells need downtime to recover from working all day. So cells are constantly rebuilding themselves, but they need downtime to do that. Now, some cells, like our heart cells, have to rest and recover in between beats, and that's why our heart cells are so vulnerable. But most of our cells need 8 hours of good sleep every night. Average in America, 6.5 hours. And if you're only sleeping 6.5 hours, I was even sleeping less, you start your day with cells that haven't recovered from the day before. And you do that day after day, and it becomes a real problem. Number four is the category of physical stress. Obviously, trauma isn't good for our cells, but being sedentary is just as bad because if you don't move, you don't generate blood flow. So, congestion of dead cells and debris is constantly collecting in the spaces around our cells and if that isn't flushed out, then our cells just can't breathe. They can't purge toxic substances. So moving, moderate physical activity through the day increases blood flow, dilates blood vessels, and flushes all that junk out. So that's really vitally important. And then the fifth is microbes. That's our arch enemy. So what the damage that microbes do is they basically consume our cells. We are food. So what microbes want is food. Everything has to eat. Every living organism is food for something else, and they can live. And so the microbes we're exposed to are host dependent. They have to get their food from a living host. So we're basically food, and that's how they do damage to us, and it damages our cells. No matter what illness you're talking about or what symptom you're talking about, you can, if you work hard enough, you can trace it back to those 5 factors. And that's really the formula for wellness right there.
Yeah, absolutely love it. On the one with like toxicity and things in our environment that are maybe toxic, what do you think are maybe some of the most common ones there?
It's not the big exposure that's really hitting us. It's that everyday low grade exposure. I mean, you think about it, 100, 200 years ago, we weren't using petroleum. And there are a lot more people. When I was born, there were 3 billion people on the planet, and most of them didn't drive cars. Now we have 8 billion people and over 2 billion cars that are in use pretty regularly, plus all the industry to clothe, feed, and entertain all those folks. And it really, so we are using petroleum to the hilt, and it's generating a lot of toxic chemicals in our environment. When we look at this thing of tick bites, I grew up playing in the woods. Most kids today don't go in the woods very much. They play on sports fields that are regularly saturated with glyphosate and other kinds of toxic substances. And so, not to say that we should ignore tick bites. That's not where I'm going with this. But I am saying that it's setting us up to be vulnerable to these microbes that are carried by ticks and other sources. They're all opportunists. They get in our system, they can invade our cells and go dormant, and we don't hear from them unless we're stressed. And modern world, it's pretty stressful. It's not a natural way for us to live. We're not eating natural food. We're exposed to these unnatural toxic substances continually. And we're getting them in our food, our water, everywhere. We're not moving like we should. We're not getting the rest that we should. And we probably are exposed to a lot more microbes because people are so mobile now. So
Yeah.
it is putting us in a situation that microbes have a lot more opportunities to make us sick. Things that were low grade that historically probably didn't do us much harm are harming us now just because of the way we're living. As far as specific toxic substances,
Or yeah, like
there's
how can,
so
like what should,
many.
is there anything we can do about it, right? Or yeah, what can we actually do about all this toxic exposure that we have no control over? That, some people are living in an inner city right now with, all sorts of
Yeah,
pollution going on. Is there anything they can do? And maybe I do want to actually, in a little bit here, ask you about your favorite herbs and what their kind of use cases are and things like that. But yeah, is there anything people can do?
absolutely. That's where it does get a little bit easier. When you look at toxic substances, they can only get in your body one of three ways. You can consume them through food and beverages. You can breathe them. That's the most difficult one, or you can layer them on your skin. Food, buying whole foods that aren't encased in plastic as much as you can. I know that's sometimes hard to do, but just a whole food is going to have less chemicals in it than a processed food product. Um, Buying organic really makes sense. Now, that doesn't completely rule it out because even organic foods get some stuff from the atmosphere. So that's really important. So buying organic, buying whole foods, that is the biggest things that you can do to help with the food thing. And there's a group called the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, that post regular list of foods that you should avoid or foods that are clean and safe. So that's a good resource just to check every now and then. Our water, filter your water and make most of your beverages at home or buy beverages where it says on the label that it's been filtered. I think that's really important to get as clean a water as you possibly can. Skin, that one's pretty easy. Just buy natural skin products. I mean, it costs a little bit more. Natural toothpaste, natural skin products. What you find in an average pharmacy, 99% of it, including all the drugs, 99% of drugs are made from petroleum. And most of our skin products are made from petroleum. These things are cheap. They're inexpensive to make, so it costs about double sometimes to make a natural skin product. But they're readily available now. Cost a little bit more. I promise it's worth it. Air is a little bit tougher. I've gone out of my way in my lifetime that where I live currently is in a neighborhood that's completely surrounded by trees. So I've got very dense trees all around me. Trees are nature's air purifier. I also live on a salt marsh, so open water, being surrounded by nature really matters. I know everybody doesn't have that luxury though. And so plants inside your home plus really, really good air purifiers. And then when you do go outside, go out to nature or or parks, like even Central Park, you can get into trees. Although you're going to find better air walking among trees just because nature is going to purify those things. So those are looking at the unnatural toxic substances we're exposed to. The biggest natural thing we're exposed to is mold and mycotoxins. And that can be prevalent in many, many homes. So that's a matter of just being vigilant. My current home, we have a dehumidifier in the crawl space. We're really particular. I actually have an outside shower most of the time, and the warmer months, like 9 months out of the year, I shower outdoors, so I'm not bringing moisture into the house. So it really, really cuts down on the potential for mold. Little things like that, little simple things can really make a difference in your life. And clean environment. I read recently, this was a study back in 1993, that over a year's time, we replaced 98% of the atoms in our body. So think about that, what you could do in a year's time of clean air, clean water, clean foods, clean skin products. You can replace all that bad stuff that you've been collecting. You can get rid of all of it. Your body will purge it.
Amazing. Yeah, really, really good advice. Absolutely love that. I do want to talk because you are an expert on a lot of these. I know you're a big fan of phytonutrients, different herbs. Maybe let's talk about some of your favorite ones, or maybe ones that you've seen work for you or people that you've worked with over the years.
Yeah, there are quite a few herbs that are really nice out there that I think people can utilize safely that really have wonderful properties. When we say that word herb, it's really pretty expansive and it includes everything from food plants and culinary herbs, which really have some wonderful health benefits, all the way to the other spectrum to herbs that aren't commonly used today but have strong drug like properties or are poisonous. So I like to stay in a category that I call the green zone herbs of herbs that they don't have chemicals that have drug like properties. A lot of our drugs actually come from plants, and many of those plants are defined as poison. So, with a drug, we want to poison a reaction so a substance, so a symptom will go away, but we use a therapeutic dose. And so all drugs basically are poisonous if at certain level. So the herbs I'm talking about, the poisonous dose, we had one of our extracts looked at and it was like 3,000 capsules a day. It was something crazy. So it's hard to get in trouble with certain herbs that we call adaptogens and herbs that have just general health benefits. Top of the list, one that everybody's heard about is turmeric. It's
Hmm.
found in Indian curries. Wonderful anti inflammatory properties. Now, that comes because it's a wonderful cell protectant and it lowers some of the immune's reactions to the process of inflammation, has antimicrobial properties that are really nice against a lot of things like toxoplasma that I just talked about.
Mm.
So that's a nice one to add in. Um, Adaptogens like rhodiola are excellent. Ashwagandha, a lot of people are hearing about ashwagandha. That's a favorite adaptogen that balances your stress hormones, still has some antimicrobial properties. So, all of your herbs, again, what we're doing is basically borrowing the defense and regulatory system of the plant. So, we're going to get a broad spectrum of properties that include antimicrobial properties against bacteria, viruses, protozoa, yeast. We're going to be able to, we're going to be blocking free radicals, toxic substances. So they have many, many different protective effects, but also the regulatory chemicals that the plant is using to coordinate its cellular functions are very much like our hormones. And plants that are compatible with ours, these adaptogens help us balance or normalize our stress hormones. Really important to do that. So really nice herbs. Now, one particular category of herbs that I like a lot are what I'm starting to call adaptogenic antimicrobial herbs. So certain plants, the characteristics of the plant will be affected by the stress factors it has in its natural environment. So if you've got a plant that's in an environment that's warm, moist, and there are lots of microbe stress, it's going to be a really good antimicrobial. So Japanese knotweed is one we use a lot. It's a good source of resveratrol that you find in wine, but it also has these wonderful antimicrobial and adaptogenic properties. Andrographis, a great antiviral, very similar with those properties. Garlic, that's a great one. Ginger, you can get that in the grocery store. Fantastic antiviral, and it'll help restore. It'll help soothe your stomach. It's just a wonderful herb. I do fresh ginger tea all the time. Um, some of our medicinal mushrooms, reishi, like if you're taking a walk in the woods and you see a mushroom that looks like a fan on the side of a tree and it's got kind of a rust colored rainbow color, that's a reishi. And there are many species of reishi. They grow worldwide, but the Asian species has been studied in Japan and been found to have some of those potent anti-cancer properties known. So those are just a few of my favorites. Of course, there are many, many, many others. But I tend to use them for their effects and promoting cellular health. And when you protect cells, cells have the ability to recover. So the process of healing is the ability of cells to recover from stress or injury, that ability to regenerate and recover. And so what we're doing is protecting cells, reducing the stress that is being imposed on the cell so it can actually recover. So in that way, unlike any drug on earth, herbs are actually promoting the healing process directly at the cellular level. So I think that's really, really important. There is nothing on earth that can do that. And it's very
Yeah.
different than using nutrients and other kinds of things.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I know me personally, obviously, I can only speak for myself, but I've seen family members as they get older and something happens. Next thing you know, they're on 4 prescriptions, then they get a side effect, they need another 1 or 2 prescriptions, and it just goes down a really bad path. I know for myself personally, any plant-based kind of phytonutrient herbs, natural things that I can take to help protect my body or to help heal myself naturally without having to take something that could potentially cause a side effect and then go down this rabbit hole of kind of taking prescriptions forever. Anything I can do to avoid that. And so I really appreciate your way of thinking and your advice and talking about these different herbs. I know you've also formulated some products as well. If you want to feel free, yeah, I would love to. I'm sure people want to know where they can learn more. Maybe if you have any products that are for specific use cases or people who might have certain illnesses and maybe your products could help, please mention that.
Yeah. Well, again, the root of any chronic illness is cellular stress. And we have different chronic illnesses because different cells are being stressed by different microbes or different factors. But when you bring in that herbal equation, you're affecting all of those stress factors plus of this broad spectrum antimicrobial properties of reducing any kind of microbe threat. So it can be valuable in really any disease process. And what we're doing by reducing cellular stress is allowing the body to recover. That takes time. So, drugs reduce symptoms and can make you feel better quicker, but the herbs are the long game. That's the thing that's actually going to get you back to health. When I was really into this thing, I was in a medical practice and I realized, I was having such a great response with different herbs, but finding good products and finding things that would actually that would benefit my patients was challenging. I mean, there's a lot of junk out there on the market. And I found at that time, this has been like 15 years ago, I could actually have herbal products made to my specifications. So I started researching where to get the highest quality extracts and I started having these things built. So I started formulating products 15 years ago and combining things, just those little bit of dissimilarity between herbs that are complementary that you can get a synergy from, bringing those things together really, really gives you a nice response. But the big thing is using the highest grade extract that you can. And that's what separates good products from so-so products, that if you're not using a high grade extract, people aren't going to get the response that they want. But one of the first products I formulated used ashwagandha, and I found that ashwagandha was good, especially a high grade of ashwagandha, but I could make it better by adding some calming herbs and adding a substance called L-theanine, which is an amino acid from green tea, which competes with your excitatory neurotransmitters in your brain, and it has this focusing effect that's just wonderful. Putting those together was really wonderful. And then later I started combining different herbs for their antimicrobial properties and their restorative properties. And the latest thing I've been doing is combining those, but into a program that helps walk people through that process of recovery. starting at the early stages where their whole body is in turmoil and their fight or flight response is activated, using herbs to calm that, starting to calm some of the microbe stress, and then working toward restoring those detoxification pathways in gut health, and then moving them toward really restoring cellular health at a high level. So we've been doing that. That program's called Restore 180, and it's been a lot of fun putting it together. That's been taken all my time over the past year, is creating that and putting the products to purpose with just a pathway that people can follow to carry them through the whole thing.
Nice. And so, yeah, who would be the ideal person who might be interested in this program?
Yeah, I know we're so specific in our world today. You need this treatment for this illness.
Right, right.
And what I found in my journey is it's not that way. All
Hmm.
illness is cellular stress. And there's a microbe component to virtually everything. So when you're talking about this restorative herbs and this pathway, you're affecting those things. You're affecting those five things. Working for people to change their diet and getting toxic substance out of their environment, and getting them sleeping again and getting them active again. And then this reactivation of microbes, not just one, but everything they've picked up in their whole life. That really makes a difference with the herbs to calm that microbe stress, so we can put their body in a situation that their cells can recover. And our focus has been chronic Lyme disease, but we find that people with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, long COVID, autoimmune, it really doesn't matter. People with multiple sclerosis have respond. So part of it is how far you are. People that are more advanced in illness, that they're going to have a harder time to recover because they have a lot more permanent cellular damage. But anybody can benefit from these things. It's not specific like a drug therapy.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think the website for that is vitalplan.com. Is that right?
Correct. And I have an informational site also that's rawlsmd.com/resources.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah. And are you on any social media or anywhere else where people can follow you?
I'm constantly writing information because my journey has been so different, and I've come to such different conclusions about so many things. I do a lot of writing. I try to get out there every opportunity I can, just to help people understand that it doesn't have to be so complicated. It doesn't, getting well doesn't require thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars with testing and treatments. It's really a lot about just what you do for yourself. I mean, my recovery really didn't cost very much. I just had to figure it out. And, that pathway is available to anybody who wants it.
Amazing. And the best place for them to read your work would be on your informational site?
Yeah, the Vital Plan is a good place to get information. Of course, we're on Instagram, and I'm starting to do a lot more on YouTube, just helping people understand specific things like what your thyroid test really means and things like that.
Mm.
So a lot more information is coming. A lot of information is already available. Yeah,
Great. So they
and
can look you up on YouTube and see some of your videos there?
absolutely. Yep. But this Restore 180 program is really an opportunity to help people. We've created a community on something called Mighty Networks that allows us to control our own community. It's kind of like having a social media network that it's contained. We had a Facebook group, and it was just really it was hard to keep up with. And here it's a moderated thing that we can help people have positive conversations that are working for them, and we're having a lot of fun with it.
Amazing. Dr. Bill, this has been great. Really learned a lot. Really love learning about phytonutrients and microbes and healing on the cellular level that everyone really needs to look into and be aware of. So glad that we were able to spread this message here. And thank you for all that you do. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. It was great.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.